My name is Harper Mitchell, and I'm 22 years old. I just graduated from State University with honors in business administration, and I thought I had my whole life figured out. But standing in my parents' kitchen that Tuesday afternoon, holding a graduation card from my Grandma Rose with two crisp $100 bills inside, I realized how wrong I was. My parents, Richard and Diane, stood across from me wearing these proud smiles, saying things like, "Grandma wanted you to have a little something for graduation and she's so proud of you, sweetheart." I felt touched, honestly, but there was this tiny whisper of disappointment in the back of my mind, because Grandma Rose had always been so generous, almost extravagant with her gifts, and $200 seemed modest for someone who took me to Europe for my 16th birthday. But I pushed that ungrateful thought away and was about to text her my thanks when the kitchen phone rang. Mom picked it up, and I heard Grandma's voice on the other end, cheerful and warm as always. Then Mom put it on speaker, and Grandma said the words that made my blood turn to ice. "Sweetheart, did you get my graduation gift? All $18,000 of it." Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, this gets absolutely wild. You won't believe what my parents did next, and I promise this story will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Now let's get back to the moment my entire world turned upside down. To understand how devastating that phone call was, you need to know about my relationship with Grandma Rose. She wasn't just my grandmother, she was my hero, my mentor, the person who believed in me when I doubted myself. Grandma Rose was a 78-year-old powerhouse who had built a successful real estate empire after my grandfather passed away 10 years ago. She was worth over $3 million, lived in a gorgeous condo in Florida, and had this incredible ability to make everyone around her feel special. But with me, it was different. I was her golden grandchild. And I don't say that to brag. I say it because it's the truth that made everything else hurt so much more. Growing up, I was the achiever in our family. I maintained straight A's all through school, became captain of the volleyball team, led the debate club to state championships, and volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. I worked my tail off because I genuinely loved learning and pushing myself, but also because I saw how proud it made Grandma Rose. My older brother Tyler, who's 25 now, dropped out of college after one semester and bounced between odd jobs, never really finding his footing. My younger twin sisters, Mackenzie and Addison, who are 19, spent most of their time at community college going to parties and posting on social media rather than studying. I'm not judging them, families are complicated, but the contrast was pretty stark. Grandma Rose showed her favoritism in tangible ways. She took me on that trip to Europe when I turned 16, just the two of us, visiting Paris, Rome, and London for 3 weeks. She paid for my SAT prep classes that cost over $2,000. She bought me my first car, a reliable Honda Accord that I drove all through college. Meanwhile, Tyler got a $500 check for his high school graduation, and the twins got $300 each for theirs. At the time, I thought I had earned the preferential treatment through my hard work, and maybe I had, but it also created this weird dynamic where I felt pressure to keep performing at that level. My parents, Richard and Diane, lived a completely different financial reality than Grandma Rose. Dad worked as an insurance agent at a small firm, making maybe $50,000 a year, and Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, bringing in around $42,000 annually. They raised 4 kids on that income, and it showed. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house that always needed repairs we couldn't afford. There was credit card debt that I overheard them arguing about late at night. The mortgage was perpetually behind schedule. They had borrowed money from Grandma Rose twice before that I knew of, once when Tyler needed emergency dental surgery, and again when the furnace died in the middle of a brutal winter. I tried not to add to their financial burden. All through college, I worked part-time jobs to minimize my student loans. I waitressed at this Italian restaurant called Angelo's, pulling double shifts on weekends and smelling like garlic bread every night. I tutored high school students in math and English for $25 an hour. I babysat for neighbors whenever they needed a night out. I wore thrift store clothes and learned to cook cheap meals in my dorm room. By the time senior year rolled around, I had kept my total student loan debt under $30,000, which felt like a victory. and then came the reward for all that sacrifice. I graduated summa cum laude with a 3.927 GPA, and I had already accepted a job offer at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago starting in August. The salary was $55,000 per year with benefits, and I felt like I had won the lottery. Finally, all those years of grinding were going to pay off. I was going to be financially stable, independent, able to help my parents if they needed it. Graduation day happened 2 weeks before that devastating phone call. It was an emotional ceremony held in the university stadium, with thousands of people cheering as we walked across the stage. My parents came. Tyler showed up late, but he came. And the twins took selfies the entire time. But Grandma Rose wasn't there. She called me the week before and said she had a doctor's appointment in Florida that she couldn't reschedule, something about a specialist she had been waiting months to see. I was disappointed but understanding. She was 78, her health came first. Instead, she sent a card. My parents handed it to me that evening when we got home from the graduation dinner they had taken me to at Olive Garden. We sat around the kitchen table, and Mom pulled this card out of her purse, saying Grandma's gift had arrived in the mail that morning. I opened it right there, and it was one of those generic congratulations graduate cards you can buy at any drugstore. Inside, Grandma had written in her careful cursive, "So proud of you, sweetheart. This is for your new beginning. Love, Grandma Rose." 2 crisp $100 bills fell out onto the table. I'm not going to lie, my first reaction was confusion. Not ingratitude, just genuine confusion. Because this didn't match Grandma's usual pattern. She had given Tyler $500 for graduating high school, and he hadn't even gone to college. She gave the twins $300 each, and they had barely scraped by with C averages. I had just graduated with highest honors from a 4-year university, and I got $200? The math didn't add up, but I immediately felt guilty for even thinking that way. Who was I to expect anything? She didn't owe me money just because I did well in school. My parents must have seen something in my face because Dad jumped in with an explanation. "Grandma's getting older, Harper," he said, using that gentle voice he reserved for delivering bad news. "She's on a fixed income now. She's been downsizing, selling some of her properties. She can't be as generous as she used to be." Mom nodded along, adding, "She wanted to give you something, and that's what matters. It's the thought that counts." I accepted their explanation because why wouldn't I? They were my parents. They had no reason to lie to me. So I took those $200, posted a heartfelt thank you text to Grandma telling her how much I appreciated her thoughtfulness, and went shopping the next day for professional clothes and kitchen supplies for my upcoming move to Chicago. I bought 2 pairs of dress pants, 3 blouses, a blazer, some basic dishes, and a set of towels. The money was gone within 48 hours, spent on practical items for my new adult life. And I thought that was the end of it, just another generous gesture from a grandmother who loved me. I had absolutely no idea that I had just been robbed of $18,000, or that my parents had looked me in the eye and lied with such ease that I never questioned them for even a second. So, there I was, frozen in the kitchen, holding that card with the $200 I had already spent, listening to Grandma's voice coming through the speakerphone asking about $18,000. My brain couldn't process the math. 18,000? That wasn't a typo or a miscommunication. That was a life-changing amount of money, especially for someone about to move to an expensive city with first and last month's rent to cover, furniture to buy, and an emergency fund to build. The $200. I stammered, my voice coming out way higher than normal. "Yes, Grandma, thank you so much. I already used it for work clothes and stuff for Chicago." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour, though it was probably only 5 seconds. When Grandma spoke again, her tone had shifted from cheerful to confused. $200? Sweetie, I sent you $18,000. I wrote the check myself 3 weeks ago, sat at my desk, and made it out specifically to you for your graduation. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up right there on the kitchen tile. I looked at my parents, and I watched their faces go from tanned and relaxed to absolutely pale in the span of a heartbeat. Mom's hand flew to her throat, and Dad took a step backward like he had been pushed. "Harper, honey," Grandma continued, and I could hear papers rustling on her end. "I wanted you to have a real start in Chicago. Enough for first and last month's rent, furniture, an emergency fund, maybe a reliable used car since your dad totaled yours? You earned every penny of that money with all your hard work. Before I could respond, Mom lurched forward and grabbed the phone from where it sat on the counter. "Mom," she said, and her voice had this forced casual quality to it. There must be some kind of confusion. We only received $200 in cash inside a card. Nothing else came in the mail. I watched this exchange like I was watching a movie, unable to fully believe it was happening in my real life. Grandma's response came swift and firm. "Diane, I didn't send cash. I sent a check. An $18,000 check in a security envelope with tracking. I have the receipt right here in my files." Dad jumped into the conversation then, moving closer to the phone with his hands raised like he was trying to calm down an agitated animal. "Rose, maybe it got lost in the mail? You know how unreliable the postal service can be these days. Things get stolen from mailboxes all the time." It was a reasonable suggestion, one that should have made sense, except Grandma was too thorough to fall for it. "It wasn't lost," she said, and I heard the clicking of her keyboard through the phone. "I'm looking at the tracking information right now. The envelope was delivered to your house on May 15th at 2:47 p.m. Someone signed for it. The signature on the electronic confirmation says D. Mitchell." The air in the kitchen became so thick I could barely breathe. D. Mitchell. Diane Mitchell. My mother. Mom's face turned from pale to bright red, and she opened her mouth but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for water. Dad's hands dropped to his sides, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'll have to look into this, Mom," my mother finally managed to say. "Let me check our records and call you back." But Grandma wasn't having it. "I want to talk to Harper," she insisted, her voice taking on that steel quality I had heard her use when negotiating real estate deals. "Sweetheart, are you still there? Did you personally receive a check, or did your parents only give you cash?" My throat felt like someone had filled it with sand, but I forced the words out. "Just $200 cash in a card, Grandma. That's all they gave me." The tension in the room exploded like a bomb had gone off. Grandma's voice turned colder than I had ever heard it. "Put me on video call, right now. I want to see both of your faces." My parents exchanged a panicked glance, and Dad started making excuses. "The connection isn't great for video, Rose. The camera on our phone is broken. Maybe later when we have better service." Each excuse sounded more desperate than the last. Then, "I'm calling my bank right now to find out if that check was cashed," Grandma announced. "Harper, baby, stay on the line with me." She put us on hold, and the silence in that kitchen was deafening. My parents stood in the corner, whispering frantically to each other, their heads close together, their body language screaming guilt. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they had been cemented to the floor. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my parents' integrity, was crumbling in real time. Grandma came back on the line maybe 3 minutes later, though it felt like 3 years. "The check was cashed on May 16th at your local Bank of America branch," she said, her words clipped and precise. "The security cameras at that branch will show exactly who deposited it and when. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time, Diane and Richard, did you take Harper's graduation check?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I turned to look at my parents, really look at them, and I saw my mother's face crumple as tears started streaming down her cheeks. I saw my father's jaw clench and his hands ball into fists. "Did you?" I asked them directly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did you take Grandma's check?" Mom collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, sobbing into her hands. Dad stayed standing, his posture defensive, his eyes finally meeting mine with something that looked like defiance mixed with shame. "It's complicated, Harper," he said, those 3 words that people use when they don't want to admit they did something terrible. "You don't understand our situation." But I was starting to understand perfectly, and what I understood made me feel like the ground beneath my feet had turned to quicksand. Dad pulled out the chair across from me and sat down heavily, like carrying the weight of this conversation required all his physical strength. Mom continued crying, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I stayed standing because sitting felt like accepting what was about to come, and I wasn't ready to accept anything. "We were going to lose the house," Dad began, his voice low and rough. 3 months behind on the mortgage. $11,000 past due. We got a foreclosure notice the week before your graduation. The words hit me, but they didn't excuse anything. Lots of people face financial hardship. That doesn't give them the right to steal from their children. So you borrowed from your grandmother twice already. Dad continued. Like I didn't know this information. We couldn't ask her again. She'd think we were complete failures, that we couldn't manage money, that we were taking advantage of her generosity. Mom lifted her face from her hands, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. We saw the check when it arrived in the mail, she said through her tears. We saw your name on it, saw the amount, and we just panicked. We didn't plan it, Harper. We weren't scheming. We were desperate enough to steal from your own daughter. The question came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take it back. They deserved sharp. They deserved every bit of anger I could throw at them. Dad's face hardened. We were going to pay you back, he insisted. Once we caught up on the bills, once we got back on our feet, we were going to give you the money, every penny. I laughed, and it was a bitter, ugly sound. When? How? Give me a timeline, Dad. When exactly were you planning to magically come up with $18,000? He couldn't answer because there was no answer. It was a lie, a fantasy they had told themselves to justify the theft. Mom tried a different approach. You have a good job starting, she said, her voice pleading. $55,000 a year. You'll be fine. You're young and smart and capable. But we would have lost everything, Harper. Everything we've worked for, the home you grew up in, all of it would have been gone. The twisted logic was almost impressive. In their minds, they had convinced themselves that because I had a future, I didn't need the money as much as they did. Because I was young and employed, being robbed of $18,000 wasn't really that big of a deal. That was my money, I shouted, loud enough that both of them flinched. Grandma wanted me to have it. For my future. For my apartment. And my furniture. And my emergency fund. You had no right. Dad's face turned red, and suddenly the victim act dropped away and anger took its place. Where do you think your college application fees came from? He shot back. Your laptop? Your textbooks that cost $300 each? Your dorm deposits? We sacrificed everything for you, Harper. We gave up vacations, new cars, home repairs, all so you could have opportunities we never had. Mom joined in, her tears drying up as the guilt trip intensified. We kept a roof over your head for 22 years. We fed you, clothed you, drove you to volleyball practice and debate tournaments. We supported every single dream you ever had. Is it really so wrong to ask for some help now, when we're drowning? The manipulation was so thick I could taste it. You didn't ask, I yelled back. You stole, and you lied. If you had come to me and explained the situation, maybe we could have worked something out. But you forged my signature and took my money and gave me $200, like that made it okay. That's when another horrifying detail occurred to me. Tyler knew, didn't he? I asked, the realization dawning cold and clear. Both my parents looked away, which was answer enough. I pulled out my phone and called my brother right there in front of them, putting him on speaker. He answered on the third ring. Did you know about this? I demanded without preamble. Did you know Mom and Dad stole my graduation money? There was a long pause, and then Tyler sighed. They're our parents, Harper, he said. Like that explained everything. They were desperate. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to tell me, I screamed into the phone. You were supposed to have my back. Tyler's voice got defensive. Easy for you to say. You're the golden child, Grandma's favorite. Some of us don't have an inheritance waiting for us. That's when I realized something else. They paid you off, didn't they? Silence confirmed it. How much, Tyler? More silence. How much did they give you to keep quiet? Finally, he admitted it. $3,000 from my savings account. They needed it to make the mortgage payment. I gave it willingly. The betrayal was complete. My parents had stolen from me, lied to me, and bought my brother's silence. I hung up on Tyler and turned back to face them. You forged my signature. I said, needing them to admit every detail. Dad nodded slowly. We used mobile deposit. We told the bank it was a family emergency and that you had authorized it verbally. The teller didn't question it because it was going into an account with your name on it. Of course, they still had access to the joint checking account we had opened when I was 16 for direct deposit from my first job. We gave you $200 to make it seem like Grandma had sent something, Mom added, like she wanted credit for that gesture. We knew you'd text her to say thank you, and it would seem normal. The premeditation of it all made me sick. This wasn't a panicked mistake. They had thought it through, planned the deception, executed it, and then looked me in the eye for 2 weeks pretending everything was fine. Well, pay you back, Dad said again, pulling out the same tired promise. With interest. Well, work out a payment plan. Like you worked out a payment plan for my car, I shot back, remembering another broken promise. You totaled my Honda 8 months ago, Dad. The insurance paid you $12,000 because the car was in your name. You promised to buy me a replacement. Where's that car? Where's that $12,000? His face told me everything I needed to know. That money was gone too, spent on whatever crisis or convenience they had deemed more important than keeping their word to me. I walked out of that kitchen, went up to my bedroom, and called Grandma back. And I told her absolutely everything, every painful detail, while my parents listened to my footsteps above their heads and knew their lies had finally caught up with them. Grandma Rose didn't interrupt me once as I explained everything from my bedroom, my voice shaking and tears finally falling after I had held them back for so long. When I finished, there was a silence that felt different from the earlier ones, not confused or shocked but calculating and cold. They forged your signature, she finally said, her voice deadly calm. That's bank fraud, Harper. That's identity theft. Those are federal crimes. Do you understand what I'm saying? I did understand. I understood that my parents could go to prison. Each charge carries up to 30 years in prison and fines up to $1 million. Grandma continued, and I realized she must have been looking this up on her computer while I talked. Grandma, I don't want them arrested, I said quickly, panic rising in my chest. They're still my parents. I just want my money back. Her response was firm. What you want and what needs to happen might be two different things, sweetheart. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm driving up there tomorrow. I'm leaving Florida at sunrise, and I'll be at your house by evening. And this is going to end, one way or another. I begged her not to call the police yet, to give me 48 hours to try to work things out, and she agreed but made it clear that if my parents didn't cooperate fully, she would press charges without hesitation. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, my mind racing through every memory of my childhood and wondering what else had been a lie. Around midnight, I heard my parents arguing downstairs, their voices carrying up through the heating vent in my floor. I got up and pressed my ear against the vent to listen. We should have known Shed find out, Mom was saying, her voice thick with tears. Your mother always spoils her. We can't compete with that. Dad's response chilled me. Well, figure it out. Harper will calm down. She always does. She's too soft-hearted to actually let us suffer real consequences. What if Rose presses charges? Mom asked. Real fear in her voice now. What if we lose everything anyway? Dad's answer made me realize how little remorse he actually felt. Harper won't let that happen. She loves us too much. She'll protect us. They weren't planning to make this right. They weren't consumed with guilt over hurting me. They were counting on my love for them, my loyalty, my softness, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. It was a level of manipulation I hadn't fully understood until that moment. The next morning, I came downstairs at 7 a.m. with a printed document I had stayed up until 3 a.m. creating. It was a repayment contract, legally worded thanks to Google and templates I found online. I wanted my parents to pay back the full $18,000 plus 10% interest, which came to $19,800, paid over 12 months at $1,650 per month. I presented it at the breakfast table where they sat drinking coffee like it was a normal day. Sign this, I said, sliding the paper across to them. Dad picked it up, read it, and laughed. Actually laughed. Harper, that's impossible. We can't afford $1,500 a month, I corrected him. $1,650. And you should have thought about that before you stole my money. Mom tried to negotiate. We can do $500 a month. That's reasonable. Give us 3 years to pay it back. I did the math in my head. 500 times 36 months was only $18,000, no interest, and that assumed they would actually follow through for 3 entire years without missing payments. $1,500 per month, or I let Grandma do what she wants, I said, holding firm even though my hands were shaking. Mom played the health card, something she did whenever she was losing an argument. The stress of this is giving me migraines, Harper. You're being cruel. Were your parents? But I had spent all night finding my backbone, and I wasn't going to lose it now. Then you shouldn't have stolen from me. Sign the contract or deal with Grandma when she gets here this afternoon. The mention of Grandma's arrival changed the atmosphere. They signed the contract, Dad's signature angry and hard enough to tear the paper, Mom's shaky and small. But as Dad handed it back to me, he muttered under his breath, "You'll regret turning on your family like this." It wasn't remorse, it was a threat. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was my best friend Sloane, and she sounded upset. "Harper, did you see Mackenzie's Instagram story?" My stomach dropped. I opened Instagram and went to my sister's profile, and there it was. A video of Mackenzie and Addison on a gorgeous beach, crystal blue water behind them, fancy resort visible in the background. Caption reading, "Summer vacay courtesy of Mom and Dad. Best parents ever." I felt the rage rise in me like a physical force. I showed the phone to my parents. "Malibu? You sent the twins to Malibu while claiming you're so broke you had to steal from me." Mom's face went red. "We booked that trip in March. It was already paid for. We couldn't get a refund." Dad added, "The girls had a tough semester. They needed a break." I almost threw my phone at the wall. They got C's and D's. I graduated summa cum laude with a job offer. But they get a beach vacation and I get robbed. The favoritism, the hypocrisy, the sheer audacity of it all was suffocating. "How much did that trip cost?" I demanded. They wouldn't answer. I looked it up myself, finding the resort the twins had tagged in their photos. 4 nights at that place started at $900 per night, plus flights, plus meals, plus activities. Conservative estimate, $4,000. My parents had stolen my graduation money while simultaneously funding a luxury vacation for my sisters. The realization that I had never truly been the golden child, that I had just been the useful child, the achieving child, the one they could exploit for bragging rights and Grandma's favor, hit me like a truck. And that was just the beginning of understanding how deep the deception went. Grandma Rose pulled up in her white Cadillac Escalade at exactly 2 p.m., right on schedule. I watched from the living room window as she stepped out, and even at 78 years old, she was the picture of elegant authority. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, she wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage payment, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked serious and expensive. She walked up to the front door with the confidence of someone who had negotiated million-dollar real estate deals and wasn't about to be intimidated by anyone. My parents answered the door with fake smiles plastered on their faces, trying to pretend this was just a normal family visit. "Rose, so good to see you," Dad said, moving in for a hug that Grandma completely sidestepped. "We need to talk," she said, walking past them into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "Family meeting. Now. Where's Tyler?" Mom stammered that Tyler was at work, but Grandma pulled out her phone and called him right there. "You have 30 minutes to get to your parents' house, or I'm calling the police and filing charges against all 3 of them," she told him calmly. "Your choice." Tyler arrived in 26 minutes. The twins were still in Malibu, and when I mentioned that, Grandma's eyebrows rose. Interesting. They couldn't be bothered to come home for a family crisis, but they had time for a beach vacation. My parents tried to explain that they hadn't told Mackenzie and Addison about the situation, that they didn't want to worry them, but Grandma cut them off. "You mean you didn't want them to know you're thieves?" The word hung in the air like poison gas. She set her briefcase on the coffee table and opened it with deliberate slowness. "Let's review the evidence," Grandma said, pulling out a stack of papers. She laid them out one by one, like a prosecutor presenting a case. Bank statements showing the check being cashed, the tracking confirmation showing delivery to this address, the signature that clearly said D. Mitchell. She even had screenshots from the bank's security system, obtained through her lawyer, showing my mother in their garage using the mobile deposit feature on her phone. The timestamp read, May 16th at 9:17 a.m. Mom couldn't even look at the pictures of herself committing the crime. Then Grandma asked the question that made my world tilt even further. Is this the first time you've stolen from your children? The silence that followed was answer enough. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My parents stared at their hands, and Grandma nodded like she had expected this. Harper, sweetheart, did you know about your college fund? My brain scrambled to understand what she meant. What college fund? I asked, genuinely confused. Grandma's face softened with sadness as she explained. I started a college fund for you the day you were born. I deposited $500 every single month for 18 years. With compound interest, that account had over $100,000 in it when you turned 18. The room started spinning. $100,000. A full college fund that would have paid for everything, tuition and room and board and books, with money left over. Your parents were custodians of the account until you turned 18, Grandma continued. Then it was supposed to transfer to you. Did you ever receive any of that money? I shook my head, unable to speak. My parents had let me work myself to exhaustion, take out student loans, eat ramen noodles for dinner, stress about every expense, while they sat on $100,000 that was supposed to be mine. Dad tried to explain, his voice defensive and desperate. We used it during the recession. The economy crashed. I lost my commission-based income for almost a year. We were going to lose the house back then too. We had to use it for household expenses. We were going to pay it back. It was the same excuse, the same empty promise. Grandma turned to Tyler. And you, young man? Did they take yours too? Tyler's face crumbled, and I saw tears in my brother's eyes for the first time since we were kids. $40,000 when I turned 21, he admitted. That's why I dropped out of college. I couldn't afford to continue, and they kept saying the money was tied up, that I'd get it eventually. I never got a penny. The pattern was clear now. Our parents had systematically stolen from their children, justified it with financial emergencies, and never made good on their promises to pay it back. They were predators who saw their own kids as ATMs. Grandma asked about the car my dad had crashed, and I explained the whole situation, how the insurance had paid $12,000 to my parents, and I never saw any of it. Where's that money? Grandma demanded. My parents claimed they used it for house repairs, so Grandma made them walk her through the house room by room. We went through every space, and Grandma pointed out what I had been too close to see. The roof still leaked in the corner of my bedroom. The air conditioning hadn't worked properly in 3 years. The paint was peeling in the hallway. The kitchen cabinets were falling off their hinges. The bathroom tiles were cracked and moldy. Nothing had been repaired. Not a single thing. So where did that $12,000 go? Grandma asked again, her voice sharp as a knife. Then I remembered something that made me feel sick. Dad bought a truck 6 months ago, I said quietly. A new Ford F-150. Dad jumped in immediately. I needed that for work. My old car was dying. But Grandma wasn't buying it. Richard, you drive 10 miles to an office job where you sit at a desk all day. Why did you need a $35,000 pickup truck? The math started adding up in my head. $12,000 from my car insurance, $18,000 from my graduation. The twins' college funds probably plundered too. Tyler's money gone. My college fund stolen. We were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that had flowed through my parents' hands, supposedly for emergencies and necessities, but somehow they always ended up with new purchases while their children struggled. Grandma demanded to see their bank statements, and Dad initially refused, saying it was private. Grandma pulled out her phone. Show me right now or I call the FBI. Wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, these are federal crimes. Her finger hovered over the screen. Dad caved and brought out his laptop. For the next hour, Grandma and I sat side by side reviewing 2 years of financial transactions, and what we found destroyed any remaining sympathy I had for my parents. Over $60,000 spent in just the past 24 months. The list was staggering. $3,000 for private tutors for the twins who didn't even want tutoring and barely showed up for the sessions, $7,000 for mom's business venture, an Etsy shop where she sold handmade candles and managed to sell exactly 3 items before giving up, $15,000 for a boat dad bought, used 4 times, then sold at a huge loss. Multiple vacations, not just the recent Malibu trip but others to Nashville, New Orleans, and Miami. $5,000 in designer handbags for mom, which I had noticed her carrying but assumed were knockoffs. Expensive dinners out multiple times per week while they claimed poverty. And, through all of this, I had been working double shifts at the restaurant, coming home smelling like pizza and exhaustion, studying until 2 a.m., stressing about every $5 textbook purchase. You watched me struggle. I said to them, my voice breaking. You watched me work myself into the ground and you did nothing. You could have helped me. You could have paid for my books, my groceries, anything, but you spent the money on boats and handbags instead. Mom had the audacity to say, "We gave you character. You're stronger for it. Look at how successful you turned out," as if deliberately letting your child suffer while you live comfortably was some kind of parenting strategy. Tyler was crying openly now, realizing that his life could have been completely different if our parents hadn't stolen from him too. Grandma closed the laptop and looked at my parents with pure disgust. "You are not parents," she said coldly. "You're parasites. You fed off your own children and justified it with lies." And then she laid out what was going to happen next, and it was clear that the consequences were only just beginning. Grandma rose, stood up, and faced my parents like a judge delivering a sentence. "You have 3 choices," she announced, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. Option 1. You pay Harper back the $18,000 immediately, right now, plus every penny of her college fund you stole. That's $108,000 total, not including interest. You wire it to her account by end of business today. My parents' faces went white. They clearly didn't have that kind of money available. Option 2, Grandma continued. You refinance this house, liquidate whatever assets you have, and we create a legally binding payment plan with my lawyer. Miss a single payment and Harper can place a lien on this property. Option 3. I press federal charges right now, you both go to prison for up to 30 years, and I pursue financial restitution through the courts, where I will absolutely win and take everything you own. The silence was suffocating. Finally, Dad spoke. Option 2. Well, do option 2. Grandma pulled out her phone and made a video call. A man in his 50s appeared on the screen, sitting in what looked like a law office. "This is Wesley Bradford, my attorney." Grandma introduced him. "Hess going to draft a contract right now while we wait." Wesley nodded professionally and asked my parents a series of questions about their income, assets, debts, and financial obligations. They answered reluctantly, each answer revealing more about how they had mismanaged money for years. Within 45 minutes, Wesley had prepared a comprehensive legal contract. The terms were brutal but fair. My parents had to pay back the $18,000 within 90 days by any means necessary, whether that meant taking out a loan, selling assets, or borrowing from family. After that, they owed $1,000 per month for the college fund restitution, which would take 9 years to complete but was legally binding. If they missed a single payment, I could place a lien on their house and force a sale. Every payment would be reported to credit bureaus. The contract was ironclad. "I need witnesses," Wesley said from the screen. Tyler was sitting in the corner, his face buried in his hands. "Tyler, come witness this signature," Grandma instructed. My brother looked up, tears streaming down his face, and shook his head. "I can't do this," he said. "Harper, you're destroying this family. Over money. You're actually going to destroy our family over money." The betrayal in his words hit me hard. "They destroyed it when they stole from us," I shot back. "Where was the family when you lost $40,000? Where was the family when I worked myself sick while they bought boats?" Tyler stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. "Don't expect me at holidays anymore," he said, and walked out. The first real fracture in what was left of our family. But Grandma found another witness, our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson from next door, who came over when Grandma knocked. Mrs. Henderson witnessed the signatures, her face grave as she understood she was watching a family implode. My parents signed the contract with shaking hands, their faces full of resentment rather than remorse. The twins got home from Malibu around 7 p.m. that evening, walking in with tans and shopping bags, completely oblivious to the catastrophe. Initially, Mackenzie and Addison were on my side. "Wait, they stole Harper's graduation money," Mackenzie said, her eyes wide. "That's so messed up." Addison nodded in agreement. "Yeah, that's really wrong, Mom and Dad." For about 15 minutes, I thought maybe my sisters would understand, that maybe we could be united in this. But then, my parents got to them. I watched it happen in real time. Mom pulled the twins aside into the kitchen, and I could hear her crying, her voice carrying through the house. "Harper's going to make us lose everything. She's taking our house. We're going to be homeless because of her greed." She was twisting the story, making herself the victim. When the twins came back into the living room, their expressions had completely changed. "Harper, this is too far," Addison said. "They're our parents. You're supposed to forgive family." I tried to explain the full scope of what they had done, the pattern of theft, the lies, the manipulation. But Mackenzie cut me off. "Grandma has millions of dollars. Why can't she just give them the money and we all move on?" It was such a privileged, naive thing to say. "Because that's not the point," I said, frustration making my voice sharp. "The point is they stole from me, lied to me, and showed zero remorse. The point is they need to face consequences." Addison shook her head. "The consequence is you're ruining our family. Thanks a lot, Harper." They both went upstairs, packed bags, and called our Aunt Lydia, Mom's sister, who immediately said they could stay with her. Within an hour, the twins were gone, and I watched them leave with this hollow feeling in my chest. Grandma tried to talk to them before they left, tried to explain the importance of accountability and boundaries, but they weren't interested. "You always loved Harper more," Mackenzie yelled at Grandma. "This is just favoritism. You're helping her destroy our parents." Addison added, "We know the truth. You just want to control everyone with your money." They left in a car service Aunt Lydia sent, and suddenly the house felt enormous and empty. Then my phone started blowing up. The family group chat that included all my aunts, uncles, and cousins erupted with messages. "Aunt Lydia, Harper, you're being ungrateful. Your parents sacrificed everything to raise you. Uncle Raymond, my dad's brother. Family handles things privately, not with lawyers. You should be ashamed. Cousins I barely knew piling on. You're tearing the family apart. Money isn't worth destroying relationships over. Your parents made a mistake, forgive them." The messages came so fast I couldn't even read them all. The only support came from an unexpected source. My cousin Bethany, who was 32 and an accountant, sent me a private message. "Good for you, Harper. Your parents did the same thing to my mom 20 years ago, borrowed $15,000, never paid it back, and everyone just accepted it. Someone finally stood up to them." Her message revealed something I hadn't known. This wasn't just about me and Tyler. My parents had a history of taking money from family members and never repaying it. They were serial financial abusers, and everyone had enabled them because confronting them was uncomfortable. Grandma blocked nearly the entire family on her phone, except me. "I've dealt with their nonsense for decades," she said. "I'm done enabling bad behavior." That night, I stayed with Grandma at the Hampton Inn where she had booked a room. We sat on the hotel beds eating Chinese takeout from paper containers, and I finally allowed myself to completely break down. "What if making everything worse?" I sobbed. "What if Tyler's right and destroying the family?" Grandma set down her lo mein and took my hands in hers. "Harper, listen to me carefully," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You didn't destroy anything. You exposed what was already broken. Enabling abuse isn't love, sweetheart. It's cowardice disguised as peace. You did the right thing, the hard thing, the brave thing." I cried until I couldn't cry anymore, grieving not for the family I was losing but for the family I thought I had but never really existed. Then Grandma did something that made me cry all over again. She pulled out her checkbook and wrote me a check for $18,000. "This is what I intended for you to have," she said, pressing it into my hands. "They can't take this from you. It's going straight into an account only you can access." I stared at the check, at this tangible representation of her love and faith in me, and I felt gratitude mixed with profound sadness. "Will our family ever be normal again?" I asked her. Grandma was quiet for a moment, then answered with painful honesty. "It was never normal, sweetheart. You just couldn't see it before. But now you're free to build something better." That night, lying in an uncomfortable hotel bed, I realized she was right. Freedom sometimes looks like loss before it looks like liberation. 1 week after the contract was signed, my parents missed the first deadline. They were supposed to start showing good faith by putting at least $2,000 toward the $18,000 they owed within 7 days. Instead, they did nothing and hired their own attorney, a cheap lawyer named Douglas Finch who operated out of a strip mall office. Finch sent an official letter to Grandma's lawyer, claiming that the check had been a gift to the family unit rather than specifically to me, that my parents had implied authorization to deposit it, that the contract I had them sign was obtained under duress and therefore unenforceable, and that they were countersuing Grandma for emotional distress to the tune of $50,000. Wesley Bradford, Grandma's lawyer, responded within 24 hours with a letter so professionally savage it was almost beautiful. He pointed out that the check was made out explicitly to Harper Elizabeth Mitchell, with no other names listed, that forged signatures constitute federal bank fraud regardless of claimed intent, that the contract was signed with an attorney present via video call with multiple witnesses, which made it completely enforceable, and that the frivolous countersuit would result in them being sanctioned by the court and potentially facing additional legal penalties for abuse of the legal system. Finch backed down immediately, but the damage to our relationship was done. My parents had declared war. Their retaliation started small but escalated quickly. First, they changed the locks on the house while I was staying overnight at my friend Sloane's apartment. That house was still my legal residence. I still got mail there. I still had belongings there, but when I came back the next afternoon, my key didn't work. I called my dad, and he said coldly, "We're not comfortable with you having access to our home anymore. You can arrange a time to pick up your things with supervision." The pettiness was shocking, but it was also illegal. You can't lock someone out of their legal residence without proper eviction procedures. Then they called my new employer, the marketing firm in Chicago where I was supposed to start in 3 weeks. They somehow got through to my future manager, a woman named Patricia Holmes, and told her I had serious mental health issues that were causing erratic behavior and that I might not be reliable as an employee. Patricia called me immediately, concerned and confused, and I had to explain the entire situation in the most professional way possible while internally screaming. To her credit, Patricia was sympathetic. "Family disputes happen," she said carefully. "Your job offer still stands. But this call from your parents was highly inappropriate and concerning." I was humiliated and furious. Through Grandma's lawyer, I sent my parents a cease and desist letter demanding they stop contacting my employer, stop interfering with my professional life, and return my belongings immediately. They complied with returning my stuff, but only after I threatened to call the police. When I went to collect my belongings with Sloane as my witness, I discovered they had gone through everything. My laptop was missing, with my mom claiming they had bought it years ago, so technically it belonged to them. A jewelry box containing heirloom pieces Grandma had given me over the years was gone, including my grandmother's pearl necklace and a gold bracelet from my Sweet 16. My memory box with childhood photos had been ransacked. Even my birth certificate and social security card were missing. I filed a police report for theft, sitting in the local precinct with Sergeant Calvin Hughes, a middle-aged officer who listened to my story with increasing concern. But when I finished, he sighed and delivered disappointing news. "This is mostly a civil matter," he explained. "Family court territory. Unless you can prove they sold the items or destroyed them, it's hard to pursue criminal charges. My advice? Document everything, take photos, get witnesses, and if the harassment continues, file for a restraining order." It felt like the legal system was designed to protect my parents rather than hold them accountable. Meanwhile, my parents launched a social media smear campaign. My mom posted on Facebook, "Heartbroken when your own child turns on you," praying for her troubled soul and hoping she finds peace. The post got over 200 likes and dozens of comments from people who had no idea what really happened, all offering sympathy to my poor, victimized mother. My dad told the neighbors that I was on drugs, and that's why I was acting crazy and making false accusations. Mrs. Henderson, the sweet elderly woman next door who had witnessed the contract signing, confronted me in the driveway one morning. "Your father said you've been struggling with substance abuse, dear," she said, her face full of concern. "Has very worried about you. Is there anything I can do to help?" I had to stand there and explain to this kind woman that my father was lying, that I had never used drugs in my life, that this was all part of their strategy to discredit me. Mrs. Henderson believed me because she had seen the evidence with her own eyes, but how many other neighbors believed the lies? The church community where my parents had been members for 15 years overwhelmingly took their side. Pastor Marcus Williams called me directly, his voice dripping with condescension. "Harper, the Bible is very clear," he lectured me. "Honor thy father and mother. Forgiveness is godly. Your parents are struggling, and instead of helping them, you're making their burden heavier." I tried to explain about the theft, the lies, the pattern of abuse, but he cut me off. "We're all sinners, Harper. We all make mistakes. Grace means helping family when they fall, not punishing them." I couldn't resist. "What about thou shalt not steal? What about bearing false witness? Don't those commandments matter?" There was a pause. Then Pastor Williams said, "I'll pray for your heart to soften," and hung up. The message was clear. Everyone wanted me to roll over and accept the abuse because that was easier than confronting my parents. Tyler showed up at Grandma's hotel uninvited one evening, somehow finding out which room we were in, probably from our parents. He knocked on the door, and when I opened it, he looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, wearing wrinkled clothes, smelling like he hadn't showered in days. "Harper, please," he begged, not even saying hello. "Just drop the contract. Let it all go. We can be a family again." I stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "They stole over $100,000 from me total," I said slowly, wanting him to hear every word. "You want me to just forget that? Pretend it never happened?" Tyler's face twisted with frustration. "I did. I moved on." "You should too." That's when I saw the truth clearly. You didn't move on, Tyler. You're broke and angry and you're enabling them because it's easier than admitting our parents are the problem. He stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "They're our parents, Harper. You're supposed to love them no matter what." I felt something in me harden. "No," I said firmly. "I'm supposed to love myself enough to not let people hurt me, even if they're family. Maybe you should try it." Tyler's face went red, and he turned and left without another word. 2 hours later, I got a text from him. "You're dead to me." The twins took it further, creating a TikTok video that didn't name me directly, but was obviously about me. They filmed themselves looking sad, with text overlay reading, "When your sibling ruins your whole family over money," and audio of a sad song playing. The video went viral in our local community, getting over 30,000 views in 2 days. The comments section was brutal. People calling me selfish, greedy, heartless. Some of my high school acquaintances even commented, "That's so sad, your parents seem so nice." Sloan reported the video for harassment, and TikTok eventually took it down, but the damage was done. My name was trending in local online community groups, with people I had never met forming opinions about my character. The most brutal attack came from an avenue I had completely forgotten about. My mom went into the bank and emptied a joint checking account I had opened back in high school when I got my first job. I needed my parents on the account back then because I was 16, and we had just never closed it. There was $2,300 in there, money I had saved from years of babysitting and odd jobs that I had kept as an emergency fund. My mom legally had access because her name was on the account, but morally it was reprehensible. I called the bank, furious, and they confirmed she had withdrawn everything. "I'm sorry, Mom, but we can't do anything," the bank representative said. "She's an authorized account holder. She had every right to access those funds." I hung up and just sat there, staring at my phone, realizing that my parents would destroy me financially and socially rather than take even an ounce of accountability for what they had done. Grandma found me crying in the hotel bathroom an hour later. "They took my emergency money," I sobbed. "They took everything they could reach. and they're going to keep going until there's nothing left of me. Grandma held me while I cried, and I felt her body shaking with her own rage at what her daughter and son-in-law had become. 2 months after the initial confrontation, my move to Chicago was only 2 weeks away, and my parents still hadn't paid a single dollar toward their debt. Instead, they did something I didn't think even they would stoop to. They declared bankruptcy. Chapter 13 Bankruptcy, which is supposed to be for people genuinely overwhelmed by debt who need a structured repayment plan. When the bankruptcy notice arrived at Grandma's lawyer's office, Wesley called us immediately. "They're trying to discharge the debt to Harper," he explained, his voice tight with anger. In bankruptcy, she'll be listed as an unsecured creditor, which means she'll get pennies on the dollar, maybe nothing at all. Grandma was apoplectic. "They planned this," she said, pacing the hotel room. "This is fraud. They signed a contract, made commitments, and then immediately filed for bankruptcy to avoid paying. That's bankruptcy fraud." Wesley agreed and immediately started investigating. What he found was damning. 4 days before filing for bankruptcy, my parents had transferred the title of my dad's truck to Uncle Raymond for the price of $1. They had sold my mom's jewelry collection to Aunt Lydia for $1. They had opened 3 new credit cards in the 60 days before filing and maxed them all out on purpose, spending over $12,000 on electronics, furniture, and cash advances. "This is textbook bankruptcy fraud," Wesley said during an emergency video call. "They're hiding assets, running up debt intentionally, and trying to use the bankruptcy system to steal from Harper legally. I'm filing a motion to dismiss the bankruptcy and including evidence of fraud." He submitted a comprehensive report to the bankruptcy court, complete with bank records, transaction histories, and witness statements. The federal bankruptcy trustee assigned to the case, a sharp woman named Miss Ramona Ellis, took one look at the evidence and launched her own investigation. Miss Ramona subpoenaed my parents' financial records going back 3 years, and what she found was a pattern of financial deception that went far beyond what had happened to me. Hidden bank accounts, unreported income from my dad's side business, selling insurance policies off the books, luxury purchases made days before claiming poverty. The bankruptcy was likely to be dismissed entirely, and my parents would owe everything plus penalties and possibly face criminal charges. But knowing that justice might eventually come didn't help my current mental state, which was rapidly deteriorating. I started having anxiety attacks before my shifts at the restaurant, full-blown panic where I couldn't breathe and my vision tunneled. I couldn't sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night, waking up from nightmares where my parents were chasing me, demanding money, calling me ungrateful. I kept replaying every family memory, every holiday, every hug, wondering what was real and what was manipulation. Sloane noticed I had lost 15 pounds in 6 weeks, my clothes hanging loose on my frame. "You need to talk to someone," she insisted. "This is destroying you, Harper. Please get help." I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Nina Caldwell, a woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma. In our first session, I laid out everything that had happened, and when I finished, she sat back and said something that changed my entire perspective. "Harper, what you're describing is financial abuse. It's a form of domestic abuse, and it's been happening your entire life, not just with this graduation money." Over the next several sessions, Dr. Nina helped me see patterns I had been blind to. How my parents had always pitted us kids against each other. How I was the golden child only when I was producing results, achievements they could brag about. How Tyler had been the scapegoat when he couldn't perform academically. How the twins were the perpetual babies who could do no wrong. How love in my family was always conditional, always transactional. Your parents display classic narcissistic tendencies, Dr. Nina explained gently. They see their children as extensions of themselves, as resources to be used rather than individuals to be nurtured. What your grandmother did by breaking this cycle and holding them accountable probably saved you from decades more of this abuse. I grieved in her office, ugly crying into tissues, mourning not the parents I had but the parents I desperately wished I had. The parents who would have celebrated my achievements without exploiting them. The parents who would have protected me instead of stealing from me. The parents who existed in my imagination, but never in reality. Then something unexpected happened. Mackenzie, one of the twins, showed up at the hotel one evening. Grandma and I were watching a movie on the laptop when there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw my sister standing there alone, looking nervous. I opened the door cautiously. "Harper, I need to tell you something," she said, glancing around like she was afraid of being followed. I let her in, and she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting together anxiously. "Mom and Dad asked me and Addison to open credit cards in our names," she blurted out. "They said it was just to help with household expenses, that they'd pay the bills every month, that it wouldn't affect us at all." My stomach dropped. "Did you do it?" I asked, dreading the answer. Mackenzie shook her head. "I didn't. Something felt wrong about it, and after everything that happened with you, I said no. But Addison did it. She got approved for a card with a $5,000 limit, and Mom and Dad maxed it out in 2 weeks. Now Addison's getting calls from the credit card company, and Mom and Dad are saying they can't pay it right now." The exploitation was continuing, spreading to the next victim. Addison was 19 years old with ruined credit before her life had even really started. "Addison's still in denial," Mackenzie continued, tears forming in her eyes. "She keeps saying Mom and Dad will pay it back, that it's just temporary, that I'm being selfish like you for doubting them. But Harper, I don't think they're ever going to pay it back. I think you were right about everything. And I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." We hugged, and she cried, and I felt a tiny piece of my broken family start to heal. Mackenzie provided me with screenshots of the text messages where my parents had asked for the credit card, complete with promises that they would absolutely pay it back, just need to get through this rough patch. Wesley added this evidence to the bankruptcy fraud case, and it strengthened the argument that my parents were serially victimizing people financially. Slowly, the tide began to turn. A local newspaper reporter named Jasmine Cooper, tipped off anonymously by my cousin Bethany, started investigating after hearing whispers about the bankruptcy case. She interviewed me, Grandma, and Wesley. My parents refused to comment. The article was published with the headline, "Local Couple Accused of Defrauding Daughter, Multiple Bankruptcy Fraud Allegations." The community opinion shifted almost overnight. People who had been sympathetic to my parents suddenly went quiet. Church members who had condemned me started calling and emailing apologies. "We didn't know the full story," they said, as if that excused their rush to judgment. Neighbors who had believed I was on drugs realized my father had been lying. Mrs. Henderson brought me homemade cookies and an apology card. The Facebook sympathy for my parents dried up completely. My mom deleted her social media accounts entirely. My dad's employer, the insurance company where he worked, launched an ethics investigation because he handled clients' money and they couldn't have someone accused of fraud in that position. Finally, my parents cracked under the pressure. My dad called me directly, his voice strained. "Okay, you win. What do you want?" It wasn't an apology, it was a surrender, which somehow felt even more hollow. "I want what you stole," I said calmly, "the therapy sessions having given me strength I didn't know I possessed, and I want you to admit you were wrong." There was a long pause. "I can't admit to crimes," Dad finally said. "My lawyer said not to admit anything in writing or on recording." Of course, even in defeat, they were protecting themselves, not apologizing to me. "Then we have nothing to talk about," I said. Dad's voice rose in desperation. "You're really going to send your own parents to prison over this?" And I gave him an answer I had been practicing with Dr. Nina, one that finally felt true and powerful. "No. You sent yourselves to prison the moment you chose to steal. You sent yourselves there when you chose to lie. You sent yourselves there when you committed fraud instead of being honest. I just refuse to be your victim anymore." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in months, I felt something that almost resembled peace. 3 months after that devastating phone call from Grandma, I moved to Chicago in August, and it felt like stepping into a completely new life. Grandma helped me move, driving the rental truck herself because she insisted she wanted to see me settled properly. My apartment was a beautiful studio in Lincoln Park, nothing fancy but clean and safe and entirely mine. Grandma had paid for the first and last month's rent as part of her original gift to me, and she took me furniture shopping, buying me a bed, a small couch, a desk, kitchen supplies, everything I needed to start fresh. "Consider this your college graduation gift, properly delivered this time," she said as we assembled a bookshelf together. Both of us laughing when we put a shelf in backwards and had to take it apart again. My job at the marketing firm started off amazingly. My supervisor, Patricia Holmes, was impressed with my work ethic and creativity. I made friends with my coworkers, joined a young professionals networking group, and slowly started to remember what it felt like to live without constant anxiety. I had weekly video calls with Grandma and monthly visits when she would fly up to Chicago and we'd explore the city together. Back home, the legal consequences for my parents unfolded with the steady inevitability of justice finally catching up. The bankruptcy was dismissed entirely after Miss Ramona's investigation revealed extensive fraud. The federal prosecutor handling the case offered my parents a deal: plead guilty to misdemeanor fraud charges, pay full restitution, and avoid prison time. The alternative was going to trial for felony fraud with a potential sentence of 5 years in prison each. They took the deal because they had no choice. They pled guilty in a courtroom, where I appeared via video link to give a victim impact statement. The judge sentenced them to 2 years of probation each, 200 hours of community service, and court-ordered payments. They had to pay me the $18,000 in graduation money plus legal fees within 6 months, totaling $23,000. They also had to pay back my college fund money, $108,000, over 10 years with 5% interest. The payment plan was strict, $1,000 per month minimum, reported to credit agencies, with the threat of jail time if they missed payments. My dad lost his insurance license for 5 years because he couldn't be trusted handling clients' money. My mom's teaching license was under review by the state board. The first payment arrived in my bank account on September 15th, exactly $1,000. I stared at it for a long time before depositing it into a high-yield savings account. I didn't spend it. I didn't need it anymore. My job paid well, I was living within my means, and I had an emergency fund from Grandma's original gift. But having that money in an account I controlled felt important, not because of the dollars but because it represented accountability, consequences, the idea that actions matter. The family dynamics had permanently shifted in ways both painful and necessary. Tyler eventually sent me an email 3 months after our last fight. It was short and awkward but genuine. I'm sorry for how I reacted. You were right. They did the same thing to me, and I was too angry to admit it. We don't have to be close, but I don't want us to be enemies either. We were civil now when we occasionally texted, not close but no longer hostile. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something resembling a sibling relationship. Mackenzie visited me in Chicago for a weekend in October, and we had the best time together, acting like real sisters for the first time in years. We went to museums, ate deep dish pizza that was way too big for both of us, laughed until we cried over stupid inside jokes. She told me Addison was slowly coming around, starting to see that our parents had used her. Addison sent me a birthday card in November with a simple message: I'm sorry I didn't believe you. Working on trust issues. Love you. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Grandma Rose became my primary family in every way that mattered. She updated her will, which I only found out about because her lawyer called me one day to verify some information. When I asked Grandma about it later, she said simply, "You showed moral courage when it would have been easier to look away." That deserves to be recognized. She wasn't cutting my parents out entirely, but I was receiving a larger inheritance now because, in her words, you're the only one who understands that love without respect isn't real love. My parents faced consequences that extended beyond legal penalties. They had to sell their house because they couldn't afford the mortgage without Dad's income. They moved to a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. They both took retail jobs to make ends meet, Dad working at Home Depot and Mom at Target. Their social reputation in the community was destroyed. People crossed the street to avoid talking to them. The church asked them to step down from the volunteer positions they held. Uncle Raymond and Aunt Lydia distanced themselves after being implicated in the asset-hiding scheme, suddenly unavailable for family dinners and holidays. Their marriage was strained to the breaking point. Mackenzie told me they were in couples therapy, that they fought constantly, blaming each other for the mess they had created together. Part of me felt a twinge of something that wasn't quite sympathy, but maybe sadness at seeing how completely they had destroyed their own lives through greed and pride. But mostly, I felt nothing. In therapy, I told Dr. Nina, I don't hate them, I pity them. They destroyed everything that mattered to avoid admitting they were wrong. She smiled and said, You broke a generational curse, Harper. That takes incredible courage. Don't underestimate what you've done. Thanksgiving arrived, and I received 2 invitations. One from my parents, sent via a formal email from my dad. We would like to attempt reconciliation. Would you consider joining us for Thanksgiving dinner to start rebuilding our family? The other from Grandma, come to Florida for Thanksgiving. No pressure, no expectations, just love and gratitude for having you in my life. I chose Florida without hesitation and without guilt. Sloan came with me, and we made it a Friendsgiving celebration. We had dinner on Grandma's beautiful lanai overlooking the ocean, the sun setting in brilliant oranges and pinks, the sound of waves providing background music to our laughter and conversation. Grandma raised her glass of wine and made a toast. To Harper, who taught us all that love without respect isn't love at all, and that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Genuine happiness, untainted by guilt or anxiety or fear. I thought about how 6 months earlier my entire life had imploded. I lost the relationship with my parents as I had known it. I temporarily lost my siblings. I lost the support of extended family and community. But what I gained was so much more valuable. Self-respect, financial security, healthy boundaries, real family in the form of people who loved me without conditions, and strength I never knew I possessed. The cost was high, but the alternative, continuing to be victimized and diminished, would have cost me my soul. On a quiet evening in December, sitting on my Chicago apartment balcony, watching the sunset over the city skyline, I received an email from my mom. The subject line read, simply, "I'm sorry." I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for another manipulation. But what I found surprised me. "Harper, I know this isn't enough, and maybe it never will be. But I want you to know I'm truly sorry for what we did to you. I'm in therapy now, real therapy, and I'm starting to understand how badly we hurt you. I justified everything to myself for so long, told myself we were good parents who just made tough choices, but I'm seeing now how much damage we caused. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to try, but I wanted you to know I'm working on becoming a better person. Maybe someday, if you're ever ready, we could try to rebuild something. I love you, and I'm sorry. Mom." I read it 3 times, searching for the catch, the manipulation, the hidden demand, but it seemed genuine as my mother had ever been with me. I felt something, but it wasn't the anger or hurt I had carried for months. It was just a neutral acknowledgement that she had written words, and words were a start even if they couldn't undo actions. I wrote back a brief response. "I appreciate the apology. I'm not ready for a relationship yet. I need more time, and I need to see consistent change, not just words. But I hope you're getting the help you need. Maybe someday we can talk." I sent it, closed my laptop, and felt okay with that answer. Life moved forward. I called Sloan to make plans for the weekend. I prepped for a big presentation at work. I scheduled my next therapy session. I texted Grandma to thank her again for Thanksgiving. The wound my parents had inflicted was healing, slowly but surely, leaving a scar that I would carry but that no longer defined me. I had learned that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up for you, who respects you, who loves you without trying to control or exploit you. They say family is everything, and I used to believe that without question. But I learned that family is only everything if they treat you like you matter, if they see you as a person rather than a resource, if they celebrate your success rather than resent it. I spent 22 years being grateful for crumbs from my parents' table, accepting whatever they gave me and telling myself I should be thankful. Now I know I deserve the whole feast, every course, every bit of nourishment and celebration and genuine love. And anyone who can't offer me that, who can't see my worth, doesn't deserve a seat at my table. I stood on that balcony, the Chicago skyline sparkling with lights, the future stretching out before me open and bright and mine. I didn't destroy my family. I saved myself. And that was not only enough, it was everything. Maybe one day there would be reconciliation with my parents, built on genuine change and mutual respect. Maybe my siblings and I would find our way back to each other fully. Maybe not. But I was done letting the possibility of those maybes hold me back from living the life I had earned through my hard work, my integrity, and my refusal to accept less than I deserved. The sun set completely, and the city lights took over, thousands of them twinkling like possibilities. I went inside, closed the balcony door behind me, and got ready for whatever came next. Because for the first time in my life, I was facing the future not as someone's golden child or useful tool or disappointing daughter, but as Harper Mitchell, whole and free and enough, exactly as I was. So what do you think? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members over money or trust? Have you experienced someone trying to manipulate you into accepting bad treatment because family is everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear your stories and perspectives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because I share real stories about real people navigating complicated family dynamics, and your support means everything. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when people judge you, even when it costs you relationships. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community. I hope you find the courage to protect yourself, and the wisdom to know when love requires boundaries. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you deserve respect just as much as you deserve love.